you're born with an identity, and kind of like over time though, society and what people tell you to be. Like my parents wanted me to be an engineer, and guess what? I became an engineer before I became an entrepreneur. So like what people speak to you at a young age, like speak into you at a young age, really shapes who you become. And sometimes it's not a fit.
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Rieckman.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. I have another amazing guest for you today, and I love the way that we met. So I just will introduce Jason here more formally in a second, but to kind of set the stage, I was coming from the stage at Traffic and Conversion Summit in Las Vegas earlier this year. I had one friend there who we were friends outside of this networking group called JVMM that we're in. And she was way more involved. I'd been a member for like a year and done pretty much nothing with that group. But on the last day of the conference, she said, hey, there's a group of us from the JVMM that are going to have lunch together. Would you like to come over and meet us? And I said, oh, sure, absolutely. So I come sit down at this table. I think there's around 8 people there. And I just immediately had this resonance with Jason, who was sitting at the same table and who I'd never met, even though I'd paid to be in this networking group to meet cool people like Jason. So I'll let him kind of take it over from here. But I think from the moment we met, we're like, we're going to do some business together, probably on both sides of service. And so Jason Lee is my awesome guest today, and he runs a company called CBA Lifestyle and is concierge business advisors. So Jason, welcome. Please expand on that a little bit if you want, and then we'll jump right into your story.
Yeah, definitely. And man, that was kind of like the link because Dustin spoke on stage, and actually I remember seeing his presentation on the podcast Flywheel on the agenda, and I didn't have time to go. And I was like, man, I want to go, but there was another one. Sorry, Dustin. I mean, there was another one that was just so like really fascinating to me. So I went to that one. And then I saw him I saw him at lunch, and we ended up chatting and just talking a little bit about like what we did. But it was pretty funny because we had never met through the JVMM networking group that we were in. But because of that kind of like a loose link, right? We were able to have lunch together, get to know each other, and then became clients of each other. And I went through the podcast accelerator, which was awesome. And now I'm on podcasts, which has been really cool. So I think I'm following through on what the accelerator promised as well, which is great.
Absolutely. You're sitting here being a guest on a show, right? So it's kind of meta. So yeah, the real reason I brought Jason here is to humiliate him for not attending my presentation, because I was deeply wounded. No, I actually didn't know you. I didn't know until right now you hadn't attended, but it all worked out. Because Jason went through our accelerator. He's now in our 7-Figure Leap mastermind. We've really gotten to dive in much deeper into his journey and his business. And as he kind of noted there, I was actually the first to hire him. So he came in and helped me with some operational issues and some planning for the next stage of growth for 7-Figure Leap. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. And you're going to hear, I think, as we get through Jason's journey, why that is, because I think we both have very similar values and very similar approaches actually to how we treat people and run our businesses, but we have very different strengths, which is kind of fun to see how we can assist each other in our own growth trajectories here. So, Jason, I like to go back a little bit. I like to, for you, this does not have to be like when you're 5 years old selling, baseball cards by the roadside or whatever, but a point of significance in your life where you're like identified as an entrepreneur and where this journey towards running your own business really began, so that we can start to unpack maybe why that is and some of the things that drive you in your passion today for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, totally. So I'll start with a different one. Like I've been on a few others where I talked about a certain part that was supposed to be like brand sensitive and things like that. But I'm going to start with a fun one today because it's with you, Dustin. So I actually got started in entrepreneurship because I was really socially awkward. And I was a nerd. I played video games. And basically like outside of a video game, like you wouldn't really talk to me because I wouldn't talk to you. And a friend of mine had like told me about this guy, like he was an entrepreneur. He was like in his 20s making multiple six figures, not selling drugs, you know, and I was immediately fascinated because we were in college, right? We're at Berkeley. And you know, there's a lot of weed circulating around there. So and the thing that stuck to me though was like, if I never learn how to talk to people, I'll never get a girlfriend. That was why I started into entrepreneurship.
That is an awesome reader. I think that's the first person who's used his lack of a romantic life for starting a business. This is good. I like it, and I love what you mentioned about drugs, because I think it's getting better now as, you know, people are used to the internet and things. But I know in the early days when I'm like, I'm like making this money, quote unquote, passively, and I'm doing these things online. Yeah, it's like people kind of look at you weird, like, what do you mean? Like, are you selling drugs? Because it sure sounds like you're selling drugs. So that's awesome.
Yeah. It turns out he was selling supplements, so it was kind of close, but not really, right? It was good for your health, and so kind of like that started my journey. And then it fast forwarded. And what made me actually successful there, though, was because I was always more of like a gamer strategist. So when I played games, like I always looked at things from kind of that standpoint of min-maxing. And min-maxing is kind of this idea of doing the least you need to get the maximum result. So it's not doing like as little as possible, but it's doing just enough to get the best result that you're doing. And like I actually honed my ability to do that through playing a lot of different types of video games. Like there was puzzle games, you know, there was like I really got into Final Fantasy when it first started. And a lot of that is like stats, equipment, and your skills, right? And so I brought a lot of that when I started to get into business on like, well, what is like, I'm like, as I studied engineering, and as engineers, one of the things we're all about is efficiency, or what people might call being lazy, right? It's like, what's the least I can do to get the maximum result? And I brought that into like just really looking at business in that way. And that really sprouted my passion for like operational systems, how to install business systems into your setup so that you can really get amazing results. While also having time for the rest of your life. Like I'm a father now. I have another kid coming pretty soon. And so I feel like life is only getting busier and busier. And my business systems need to kind of rise to that level. Cause, you know, if this were 10 years ago and I could just burn the midnight oil, working my butt off, just hustling, I never would have considered systems. And that's actually what I did back then. And now it's like, I don't got time for that. Literally, like I don't have any time to do all of those things. So I need systems to back me up. But in fact, thankfully, those systems actually make my life feel a lot more full and valuable, even as I'm doing them, even though I feel like I'm doing less than before.
So you come from this mindset and this viewpoint of engineering and gaming and always trying to maximize for efficiency. And I know you had different businesses, and we don't need to go through all of those, but so obviously the systematic thinking and that min-max thinking, which I think is a really cool way to think about business, are very prevalent themes. You and I have talked a lot about quick start, not quick start, and some of the things that we'll unpack here in a minute, maybe with some assessments we've taken. But is there any other, when you look back over the doing this to get a girlfriend to like now actually helping other people with business systems and operations at a high level, any other themes or things in there that you would like to point out to the audience that's maybe a little unique to your journey?
Yeah, I would say, well, I don't know if this is unique actually, like some, because I hear a lot of different stories where like some people knew exactly what they were going to do, like from the moment they were born. Right. Yeah. But I tried a lot of different businesses. And so I've recently been hearing that's more and more common than you might think. And it just makes not a great origin story. So you don't really hear that part of people's story until you're really deep into their world. Right. But it was like, I've tried a lot. Like I was selling supplements, you know, I did marketing. I did like growth coaching here and there. And I tried a lot of different things before I really arrived at knowing like, oh, actually that through line of like what the skill and the kind of like unique ability that carried me through those businesses, success or failure, was strategy. And then kind of like the second aspect of it was actually really being able to bring the right people together. I hadn't realized this in the beginning because I was thinking like, oh, like I'll one man show because that's what my mentor was doing, right? Like this one man making multiple six figures doing his thing. But what I didn't realize back then too was like he had actually built a team around him that allowed him to be his most effective. And in my recent years, probably in like the last 4 or 5 years, I really started to leverage that. I found a partner who is actually incredible at operations. So I've been in sales and marketing myself for almost 10 years, but he's been in operations for more than that. And so with our partnership, like I have a vast understanding of it because it fascinates me, and I always think like that. But I'm much more better at communicating it than doing it. Yeah. And when I partnered up with him, he was able to fill in all the nitty gritty aspects of the operation. So like we now have a really great partnership, and we're bringing on the right people. So like, I guess that's another through line of like, why I couldn't do it alone. But then when I found someone who was kind of like the other fit to that puzzle, we really started gaining traction as a business.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the reflection there on your unique ability and the fact that while it's super strong for the type of business you want to create, it's incomplete, right? So you have a business partner and you guys really complement each other. And I've had businesses with partners in the past for those same reasons. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. But I also want to kind of point out a couple of things there with kind of thinking about values and kind of why you do what you do. There's some real, I think, emotional ties to that. And I think the thing I kept thinking of as you were speaking was identity. It's like you open like, I have this identity. I'm a gamer. I have this identity. I'm an engineer. And then as it evolves and you're like door to door selling supplements, you probably start to feel out of sorts with your identity, and you're bouncing around to different businesses, all the way up to today where you have a successful business with a business partner and you're looking to scale it. How would you say your identity has either changed, or like maybe the identity stayed the same, but your like recognition of it is kind of bounced up and down off the through line that you mentioned earlier?
That's good. It really is like there's I guess you could say your business can't keep, like if your business doesn't match your identity, you're not going to keep that business for long. And I think that in my beliefs, I'm a Christian, so I believe that you're born with an identity, and kind of like over time though, society and what people tell you to be. Like my parents wanted me to be an engineer, and guess what? I became an engineer before I became an entrepreneur. So like what people speak to you at a young age, like speak into you at a young age, really shapes who you become. And sometimes it's not a fit. Maybe it was a fit for what they wanted you to do or what they believed. Like my parents believed I would be successful being an engineer, so they really encouraged me to be one. And I don't knock them on it. Like it's really like, well, I know they had my best interest at heart. Right. And entrepreneurship is also not for the faint of heart. Like there's also tons of ups and downs. My mentor used to call it 8 till faint. Right. And like, that's how you worked back then. Like, or the funny thing is an entrepreneur is the one who quits a full-time job working 8 hours a day to work 16 hours a day, and it was very true, especially when I was starting, so I guess my identity though, it shifted kind of in the beginning from being kind of unknown. Like I didn't know what my identity should have been. All I knew is I wanted to be successful. I heard quotes like, do what they do, make what they make. So I said, all right, I'm really good at copying. I'm going to go copy the people. And I then realized that like, even though when you copy it, you don't always get what they get because your identity is different. So my own kind of journey and identity, and I won't go too deep into it unless we want to in this episode. But it's been a journey of like, over 10 years, just constantly seeking, constantly getting the feedback. Like it's kind of like even in sales, like when you go and make sales, you'll get feedback, right? Like some people say yes, some people say no, some people will slam their door in your face if you're doing door to door, right? And that's feedback. Right. And you figure out ways to get around that. And as I've been seeking my identity, I'm like, oh, maybe it's this one. I'll try this identity on, I'll try that identity on. And then it's like, it don't fit. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. Right. Some identities I spent like 6 years creating. And when I realized it didn't fit, like I was really crushed. Like I had they call it like a sunk cost bias, right? It's like, well, I've already put so much time in it. Why don't I just keep going to make it to retirement or something like that, right?
Yep.
But I think some of the most valuable decisions I've ever made, though, was turning down identities that kind of fit me, but didn't fit me truly.
That is super powerful what you just said. And I think that's one of the reasons Jason and I just resonate so much. I mean, it's really interesting to hear you say you had like these parents that encouraged you should be an engineer, you'll be successful. And I don't know if your experience has been like mine. I certainly don't regret being an engineer and going to engineering school, because it really teaches you to think and be analytical and have a strategic mind. But really interesting. I kind of got pushed in the same direction, but in almost the opposite way. Like for me, my dad was a laborer. So he was the guy with the shovel, shoveling the asphalt and cussing out the engineers on site, right? And but I witnessed, like, I don't want that. Like, this sounds like a horrible lifestyle. He's laid off half the time, and he's had a lot of struggles. But I really love the projects. I'm like seeing they're building a bridge, like that's super cool. They're building a dam, that's super cool. But I don't want to be the guy with the shovel like my dad was, because he seemed to really suffer under all that. And so I kind of looked for a way to get towards that without having that role. And I think that was a big jump towards the right identity. And then, like you described, I've had all these different businesses and all these different engineering roles, and it's continuous evolution. But I'm also a Christian, and I also totally believe that like we have a calling, we have a purpose. Our vocation, can evolve a bit over time. I do feel like we're born with the central identity, and we're kind of always refining our way towards it as we listen to God's voice and we try new things and take new risks and meet new people, and a lot of the stuff you unpacked there. So I really appreciate that. I'm a bit obsessed with like identity work, because I feel the thing you close with there, that one of the most, I don't know if risky is the right word, but one of the most disappointing things I think you can do is get like close, get your business and your life aligned almost with your identity, and then be like, it's close enough, because our true potential lies in really lining those things up. And so that kind of brings me to, I feel like when we met, like we're both in the process of what I would call like professionalizing our businesses, at a higher level. For me, it was totally on the operations side and delivery and fulfillment. For you, I feel like it was a little more on the marketing side and rounding out your team. But something I just wanted to talk about for the audience's sake, because I was not aware of this until you and I kind of met on this point in our journeys. You went and did the Kolbe A assessment. I did the same thing. My coach did the same thing. And then someone I hired as a fractional COO did the same thing. And I actually just hired an executive assistant and had them in that process do it. It's been really insightful. So I would love to hear your takeaways from you doing the Kolbe assessment. I can share a little bit about mine, and then maybe we can talk a little more about your current business status and where you're headed. So
yeah, sure.
Kolbe A for Jason Lee, what's it look like?
All right, Kolbe A. Now you'll know exactly how I am, right? After I gave you these 4 numbers that they basically define you as an individual. No, just kidding.
This is your identity. It's 4 numbers.
What's interesting is I did hear from a Kolbe expert that like when you're in times of really heavy transition, your numbers will change, and sometimes they change permanently. But what they noticed is if you have like several numbers that are exactly the same, then you're usually in a time of transition, which I thought was really interesting. So someone who was another group that I was in, they had it was like a high number and then like 3/4. And they were like, that's not really like me. It was kind of confusing. And I was like, oh, and then I heard about the transition part, which was really cool. So my numbers are 7563. So I'm high on the fact finder, and I'm actually kind of a quick start, but I'm not in the realm of Dustin, who is like the elite quick start energy of like run and gun and achieve.
When I think of you, I think of really low quick start. It was actually because of your business partner, Robert. Can you say his quick start number?
Yeah. His quick start number is 1,
which is the lowest. It's a 1 through 10 scale. So
yeah, that 1 through 9 actually.
Or 1 through 9.
And so like our average is like 3. So maybe that's why from a business standpoint, you see us moving, because he balances me out really well from that type of energy. Because like, I mean, if I had a 9 and he had a 1, like we might not ever have just gotten along because of how rapid I would be prototyping and trying stuff. And he'd be like, we haven't even validated this. Like, what are you doing? And like, we'd be running out there. which is kind of what I was like when I was younger. I had known Robert for almost like 14 years now.
Oh, wow.
So when he knew me back then, I was literally just throwing stuff at the wall and being like, we'll just have to see if it sticks because I can't figure anything else out right now. We're just going to throw. Okay. So talking about the number though, I guess what I really started to learn is that when you're kind of building a business and building a team, you need a good complement of the different numbers. So I believe it's fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer, right? So for those four, as you're doing it, like you need a good mix, and like the different roles end up in different places. So because I'm high in fact finder as well as quick start, I'm kind of like what typical visionaries might look like, where like I do a lot of research and then I start stuff, and the follow through though on my end is kind of low. Like I'm in the middle range of follow through, which is what kept me going as a solopreneur. But my partner is extremely high in follow through, and we're actually both low in implementation. So the interesting part about implementation though is like you might expect like, oh, it should be really high for someone who's like an integrator or someone who goes in and does the operations. But in fact, high implementers are people who do the work with their hands. So they're actually typically the people who are really great in the field doing the thing. And people who are higher on like fact finder or what's the other one? Quick start, right?
Quick start.
Are better in the the spearhead, the tip of the spear, so to speak, like taking the business out there, trying out new things and like innovating.
That's very cool. Yeah. I'm glad you clarified. Our patterns are actually very similar, but mine are a little more extreme, I guess. So I have 7-2-8-2. So very high fact finder, very high quick start. And I think you said it well. Like for me, it's very easy for me to make big decisions. And then I go like do a lot of research before I like commit to it. So it's like I decide, and before I commit though, I'm going to do a lot of research, gather a lot of information. I'm doing that right now as I'm switching over sales and marketing systems. I'm talking to a lot of people. I'm exploring a lot of like looking at every corner. Like I've already committed to exactly what system I want, but now it's like, now there's a lot of options on who I can partner with and who can help me. And so that I just thought of that in a moment. I'm like, this is like totally quick start fact finder. It's like in the course of one day, I'm like, had this realization that I need a centralized system for my sales and marketing. I need someone to be able to own that in the future. So now's the time to build it. I know what platform I'm going to use. Like all that happened like that. And I've spent 2 weeks talking to different, options basically under that umbrella. So I think that's kind of insightful for people who are entrepreneurs. And then 2 and 2, I'm quite low on implementation and follow through, which doesn't mean that like when we promise something to a client, we don't deliver it. It just means that like, it will get done, but it will not get done like consistently. It'll get done like at the last minute with high quality still. So yeah, it's kind of
more challenging, right? Like it's kind of like these numbers don't mean we can't do them.
Right.
It's just not our nature.
Yes.
So like even for my partner, as a one quick start, we had recently just had a talk about our strategy and like how I realized there were some things that we really had to be aware of that we weren't thinking of before. And he immediately said, all right, then we got to stop everything. We need to zero in on this thing right now. Like we need to start it today. So it's not to say like as a one quick start, he would have like kind of ruminated on that for like a few months and then said, okay, yeah, like it's more like it's just not our typical behavior. Yes. And at the same time, though, it doesn't mean that any of those qualities, like we're not good at them. It's more about, well, what's our tendency? So like
what's our natural state? Yeah,
exactly. So like if we were a little less developed and less mature, then maybe our follow through would be absolute crap, right? It would be all the way down there and like we would never follow up anything. But I think as part of personally as maturing through business, I realized how important follow through is to keep a business reputation and keep clients coming back and paying me money. And so because of that, my follow through became really high on the things that were really important.
Yes.
But they were still kind of low on the things that I thought were kind of like just secondary and didn't really matter. But and they that only moved up to when it did matter. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I have a very long to-do list, but things very easily shortcut them ways to the top because now there's urgency, or now it's like I will get it done. Like without a doubt, I've never not delivered on a promise. But if it's not like something that has to get done right now, it's going to stay on that list. And so as I was looking for an executive assistant, I'm going to do a whole podcast episode on our hiring funnel because I think it was very successful.
Fun.
But one of the things we did heading into the final interviews was have them do the Kolbe assessment, and we paid for it. And it was really insightful. What was really cool is all the finalists basically had the same profile, which is like, that's good. We're attracting the right kind of people. And it was a very, I won't get into all these details now, but I'll say there was 2 candidates that were very difficult to distinguish between which one I should hire. And I didn't only use the Kolbe, but the Kolbe really helped because one was much higher on quick start and one was much lower. And I thought, I need the energy of someone who will balance me out and be less quick starty so that I'm not inclined to go start new things. And of course, they were all way higher than me on implementation and follow through. So they can start to methodically go through some of these to-dos that are important, but not urgent. Right. So anyway, anyone that hasn't done the Kolbe,
what numbers
I
were you
really
looking for?
insightful. Yeah, go ahead.
What numbers were you looking for like an executive assistant? Just I know you'll go deeper into it. I'm just so curious now.
Yeah. So for me, it was really, they all were high fact finders. So I didn't really see that was neither here nor there. Like, great, either of us can do the research or either of us is going to go in depth. I was looking for a lower quick start than me and especially a higher follow through and implementation. And that
makes sense.
Again, someone who loves consistency, who loves systems, who, really what this person does is own our project management system and own our internal communications. And so that was really it. It was sort of like my extremes on the graph, theirs were the opposite. And that was really what I was looking for, because I see it as an operational partner and sort of a right-hand person who could eventually be promoted and grown into, something like a director of operations potentially. And therefore, I felt like it was good for their natural state of being to be different than mine, just like you have a business partner who's quite different than you in your natural states. And those tend to be our natural strengths too, right? Awesome. Well, thanks for bearing with us and going deep on Kolbe. I think that was fun. But Jason, I'd love to just tell us a little bit about what you guys do today so we can get really clear on who you serve and sort of your mission. And then let's talk a little bit about where you see yourself going over the next couple of years in your business.
Yeah, so we work with generally service-based businesses, but recently we've been making a real push to create systems for like coaches, consultants, and course creators who want to build a scalable system into their business. And that's our biggest thing is like, how can we help you create regularity and consistent quality of what you deliver when everything used to just rely on you showing up, making all the calls, right? And how can we create that consistency? Because I won't go too far into the backstory, but like before I was a consultant, I was actually a growth coach for like performance coaching, how to build habits, how to get really like high performance out of you as an individual. And I was in the coaching industry for several years, just observing, like getting my own clients as well, right? I was doing the thing, but I was also observing what some of the best coaches out there were doing. And that kind of created this kind of framework of, oh, what are the coaching models out there? What's kind of like the best? And there is no one best. It's more of like the fit. Like we were talking about identity before. It's much more about the fit to your identity that will allow you to get to where you want to go. And so that's how we help people, though. We help them identify like how to do it. And then we help them create a map on how to get there. Like, and that gets down, it can go all the way just from a broad direction to like the nuts and bolts of do this at this time. We've done all types of that.
Yeah, I love it. I can say I hired Jason's company. They really helped me sort of get out of my own head, really. Probably a better way to say it is like get all the things out of my head onto, a diagram where we could objectively look at them and say, okay, like some of these things are very aligned with your identity. Some of these things are not. And if you're going to 10X this business, what's going to break and like, what's going to be the priority? And so it really helped me in the first half of this year, get really clear on like, how do I want to change the fulfillment of how we, deliver our promises? How do I want to, change operations and who do I need to hire? And now I'm back into the sales and marketing side of the equation. But I think there's so much value if you're sitting there listening, especially if you're like a solopreneur, you founded a company and you feel like it all lives in your head and you want to have relief from that and have what I would call a real business, like something that has value outside of only your brain, then you really need to do this deep dive process. And so if you're like, yeah, that's totally what I need right now. I want to scale, I want to grow, but I feel like I'm the bottleneck. Definitely, we'll talk later about how to get a hold of Jason and his company, but I highly recommend you do a consultation with them and see how they can help. So, yeah, that's awesome. So, where do you see? I've talked on other episodes about where I see my company going. Where do you see your company going over the next couple of years?
Yeah, and number one, thank you so much for the kind words, Dustin. We had a lot of fun working with you, and it is just an incredible experience. Like you allowing us into your world to help you look at things from our lens, because that's all we really bring. We bring a different perspective from our experience, but at the same time too, it's like we really try to make sure it's aligned to your business and your goals. Sorry, like I really want to get that out there.
I
And
appreciate
you said
that.
it much better than I would have said it.
And I also want to say too, we're going to talk at the end when I kind of hand the mic to Jason here in a few minutes to talk about what types of business you can be building toward. Right. So a lot of us don't even like consciously make this choice, and I hadn't. And I was kind of saving that. He really helped me get clarity on like, what are you actually building toward? And then you can go and look at what is in your brain, take it out, move the pieces around, see what needs addressed. And so, yeah, that was the ultimate goal. But yeah, just in gratitude back to you, Jason, like that's super helpful. And so we're going to unpack that for people here as part of this episode. But yeah, so in helping people like me and our listeners, many of which are in a similar situation, like, where do you see your own business going and staying in alignment with your identity, your business partner's identity? You guys have a real dynamic at work.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not too sure at the moment. Like one of the things, like, and we were talking about this before we started recording, is alignment. And our when we had first started the business, like we were very focused on, all right, what does the market need and how can we truly serve them? How can we create real transformation, real change? And that moving forward to where we're at today, that's still at the core of what we're trying to do. And we're honestly just really open. I mean, of course, like we want to grow the business. We want to be making more revenue. We have revenue targets every quarter to grow. And like our goal is 7 figures, right? Like that's always been like the rise. But how we want to do that is really through deeply serving the people that need our services. And we have a variety. Like we've helped people like you discover more of like, okay, what would really create the makeup of your business based on your goals and your lifestyle and how you want to create change and transformation, right? Like we like to call it a calling of how we want to help the world. And we just the same, we want to do that as well for us. And we're like, as much as we want to expand what we're currently up to, we've been actually getting a lot of different requests of like different places we could help entrepreneurs, whether they're solopreneurs or they've already built up a scaled business and they want to grow even further. Or maybe their business is on fire. Like I've had a business come to me where they've built it out. They hit $9 million in revenue, and it was kind of collapsing because they didn't have the system. So we came in as kind of firefighters in that scenario. Quite stressful. Let me tell you that. Like that was one of the more our follow through went really high in that moment.
And then you went and took a massive long nap afterward because it was exhausting, probably.
Dude, I think I hibernated for like a month after that. It was insane. But like we're really just open to the call right now, and just excited to be able to help people and grow the business and grow the company. But how I look at it, like you said this before, Dustin, which is, well, if you want to make 7 figures, you want to imagine creating a 10x value to the clients that you've served. So like if I want $1 million, then my goal is to create a $10 million worth of transformations for our clients.
Yep.
And I'm open. Like if it's one client who ends up doing all of that for me and I've created 10 million, like I'll be really excited because it's one client, or if it's multiple of the people we help. So like, we're just really excited to grow and serve.
Yeah. I love it. I love you have clarity on what you do and who you're serving. It's the mechanism by which you will scale to 7 figures and beyond that you're like, not sure yet. And that's awesome. If you would have asked me 6 months ago, I definitely couldn't have answered that question. And now I have an answer. It might change though in the next 6 months, and that's the beauty of entrepreneurship and the journey that we're all on. So this is fascinating. Really enjoyed hearing your history and unpacking Kolbe and talking about the unique ability that you have and how you found the right partner to express that and how you've helped me and can help others. So what I'd love to kind of close out the episode is to let you teach us. And one of the things we've talked about in the work you did with me and in our mastermind is this idea of building with purpose toward the type of business you want. And I believe you have basically 4 types you're going to go over, kind of boil it down for us so that people listening can think, which of these do I think at this point I actually want to build? Because that's going to have a huge impact on what you do today, tomorrow, and over the next 3 to 5 years as you're building towards that vision. So the mic is yours, Jason, if you want to enlighten us a little bit on these business outcomes that we can be looking at.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm excited because if you haven't heard these before, I mean, you've probably heard each of these individually. But what I'll do is I'm going to try to put them together in a way that like you can really take a look at your own business and decide like if it's a good fit for you. Right. So, but before I talk about the 4 types, though, what I want the listener to do is similar to what I did with Dustin in the beginning, which is get really clear on your goals. I mean, like who hasn't heard that before? Right. But what you want to do is just take a moment right now to think about like, well, like what is it? Where would I want to be in 5-10 years? Do I want to be, how hard do I want to be working? Right. What kind of value do I want to be creating? And for your business, also think about the lifestyle, right? Because like the reason why we named our website cbalifestyle.com is not because lifestyle is actually in the name. It's actually not in the name. What we created, though, is the reason why I made this business in the first place is I wanted a business that supported my lifestyle rather than my lifestyle supporting my business, right? And so like think about that first, all right? And how would you want that? Now, let's go into the 4 types. So I like to call this like your business end games, and you can kind of develop this as you go. But there's 4 types, and we're going to start from the least self-managed to the most self-managed. All right. And what self-managed means is that other people are doing the work. At the most self-managed, you just own the thing and it somehow just gives you money, but you're not involved in the day-to-day anymore. Okay. So let's talk for the beginning. The first one is a solopreneur. This is like, and some people actually choose this as their end game as like a boutique solopreneur. And people can be incredibly good at this. They're usually like an artisan, like someone who's just insanely good at what they do that people are willing to pay like millions of dollars just to work with them. I know Tony Robbins doesn't have this setup, but for his own private practice, I remember at one point he was charging $1 million to work with him for 1 hour, and you had to fly to him. He wasn't coming to you. And I was like, just blown away by what that was. But like he could serve one client a year and basically make 7 figures. Isn't that like, that's crazy, right? But he was so good at what he did, and he had the clout, the reputation that he was able to do it, right? So for a solopreneur operation though, usually it's either just you, right? And you wear all the hats in that business, or you might have like a VA or 2 helping out behind the scenes. All right. And they tend to leverage a lot of systems. So I'll give like 1 or 2 pros and cons, or else we'll be here for quite a while. But the one, like my favorite part about a solopreneur though, is you can be incredibly agile. You can change, you can turn at the drop of a hat. You're like, I'm not selling this anymore. I'm selling that. It happened, right? Like you don't have to inform anybody. You've just made the decision, and you can be extremely flexible. And in times like these where the market might change really rapidly, if you have a good head on your shoulders and you're staying focused, you can be very flexible in what you do to make sure your business stays afloat, right? Also, like the overhead is really low. So like basically it's just your lifestyle costs, right? You don't have a payroll or anything that's like taking up so much of your income, and that's pretty great. The con of that though is that if you were to get sick and you weren't able to work, like for me, like my value is in my brain, right? Yeah. And when I got sick this one time, my brain literally slowed down to the point where I thought I was like I went dumb. Like I couldn't think and I couldn't work. So like at that point I was a solopreneur. I had no income. Like I had to pause clients. I had to push them back until, and thankfully, they believed in me, and I recovered. I was able to go again. But that was really a difficult time. So for solopreneurs, it's more of you have like a cushy job, so to speak, where like, I don't know how else to describe it. It's like you have a job, but it's better paying and it's more flexible, right?
Yep.
So moving up though, like if you move one step up, you go to zone of genius. And this is a favorite of mine because you get to do what you love and what you're good at, right? And as you build this, like what happens is you start to find other people who do the other parts better than you do. So for example, I brought in my partner because he's actually way more better at the details and follow through of operational systems than I was. And I made that transition to a zone of genius business, not entirely though, because in the beginning, it was just the two of us. So like instead of one though, my roles were divided. And I was focused on like half of the things I had to do before. And that already relieved me so much and allowed the business to grow faster. But a true zone of genius business, though, is like really getting an idea of what you're really, really good at and building systems and people around all the other parts. When that happens, you basically don't work another day in your life because you do what you love. You show up, you do the work. Like like Dustin's incredibly good at facilitating amazing conversations. Once his zone of genius business is built, he's just going to show up, have these calls, and then go home. Right. Like, and he's going to, I don't know, go to the beach or just relax, sipping Mai Tais on the beach or something like that. Right. So zone of genius, like the great part about that is what I just said. You get to do what you like, only what you're good at, what you love to do. And you can design it in a way where you only do that part. Everything else is taken care of. Now, the I guess the con of that is how are you going to get everything else taken care of? Right. You'll likely need leadership skills. You'll need to be able to lead a team. You'll need to be able to create systems for what they're going to do so that they can do things as good as you've done. And like Dustin sharing that hiring process, like you have to try to hire people who are better at those aspects than you. How are you going to find them? Right. So those are the cons. Like you can find them, of course, like you keep looking, but like the con of that is the effort that needs to get put in to find those people. You might have to go through several people to really identify who's key and who is a real fit. Because I don't know, like people lie on their resumes sometimes, like who knew, right? So like you got to find out, right? Yeah, so that's zone of genius.
I'll quickly interject here because I feel like I've been in the process since Jason's met me, basically of going from 1 to 2, right? So from a true solopreneur business, a couple VAs, to purposefully building a zone of genius business. I want to hear what 3 and 4 are, and I'll let you know if I'm stopping here or moving further down. But for the time being, though, what I can express in that, as you kind of express as a con, is it's a whole different skill set. Like hiring people is way different than selling stuff to clients, and leadership is a way different skill than the thing you might do in coaching or consulting or whatever service you provide. And I was very resistant to it, and mostly because of leadership experiences I had in engineering, where I felt a little burnt out by the whole thing. But when I finally opened myself up to it, I was like, well, what if I literally just showed up and did the things I was really, really good at and loved to do, and other people were responsible for the other parts? That would be worth it. So at some point I had to make the decision that would be worth the pain of growth and getting good at hiring and trusting other people and all the stuff that comes with getting from level 1 to level 2 and the 4 parts that we're going through. So I kind of want to say that, Jason, like just to affirm it. I'm in it. I'm living it. I think what you said, the upside is so worth the downside, in my opinion. And other people may hear this and be like, heck no, like I want no team ever. I'm cool wearing all the hats. I don't want to make that much more income. I just want to be where I'm at. And that solopreneur mindset is where I lived for several years. So please continue to number 3. I'm actually writing these down and I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, totally. And well, I mean, just kudos on the awareness. It's a growing experience, right? And I'll just say this too. It's like, there's no one size fits all. Like it's a progression in terms of like going from unmanaged to self-managed, right? Yeah. But it really is depending on the person, right? So the next step though is exiting, right? So you're building to exit. What you're basically doing at that point is, let's say if you've built to a zone of genius business, now you're finding a genius to replace your genius,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's even possible in some cases, right? And like if I were to say that to someone who was in the zone of genius and loving it, they'd be like, "What? Get out of here!" Right? Like, but when you're building to exit, though, they won't want to buy your business if it relies on you, right? Like, no one's going to want to pay like a big check. I was going to say fat check. Now I said both, right? That's terrible. But like, no one's going to pay big money to get a business that is all still in your head. So you need systems, you need SOPs. And like some people choose this though, because maybe they found out that it wasn't really their identity. And so they've achieved success. They're good at that. One of two things might happen is it wasn't their identity, or their identity has leveled up and it's no longer their thing. And it might have completely changed from where it was. And so from when you decide to exit though, you need to build systems and different things so that when someone else comes in, it's more of a plug and play. They can take over the business, they can run the systems and do almost as well as you did, right? Like we can't promise like they're going to do better or anything like that. But they need the systems to be able to get consistent results similar to you. And so the pro of this is absolute relinquishing of responsibilities. Like you've sold it, you're out of there, you had a huge check, you're going to go run it right off into the sunset, never looking back, right? And I guess the con, if this could be called a con, is no more money from that, right?
Yeah.
Like you get the big check and then you're off. So like, I don't know, like from an exiting standpoint, though, it's a great way to take what you've already invested into and cash out, and then take that and move into a new phase of your life, right? And like some people intentionally build towards this. Like it's very common in SaaS companies, software, where they build it to get acquired, right? Like Venmo got acquired by Stripe, right? And I don't even know how much that cost, but it was probably incredible because I use Venmo all the time, And if you make that exit, I mean, you're done, right? Like you don't got to do anything anymore. But it actually, so I look at it this way though, there's one more level. I actually put exiting, like building to exit under this one, because I think it's actually harder, which is the last level is self-managed. And the self-managed business is you own it. But it's run by another team. You have management in place. You have someone else being the CEO, the frontline salesperson, all of those things. And you own it, or you're part of the board of directors where you still, so like you could still choose to give some guidance, or you could just own it and have someone else run it. Right. I believe self-managed is harder though, because you need to sustain that over time. Right. Like just building up to exit, like you can get enough systems where someone's willing to buy it and then you're done. When you're self-managed though, those systems need to work, or else you're going to rapidly go back into the business and have to help and kind of like put out the fires again. So self-managed is kind of like the golden, I don't know, the holy grail of like how people imagine businesses, right? Like you just build it, it just pays you out and it's just running without you over there. Well, okay, the pros are quite obvious. Right? Like it's this thing that prints money for you while you're over here, right? There's some other ones, but I won't go too far into it. The cons of self-managed are actually like usually less obvious. So it's like, well, you have to keep it running. So you have to take care of the leaders of that company, the CEO, the presidents, the vice presidents. If your company's that big, you need to make sure that they're doing their job and that they're like, it's kind of like you become a coach in some respects of making sure that their mental well-being is on track. They're going to be healthy for the long run so they can keep running the company. And so your leadership will have to rise to a whole nother level, or you bring in a leader, but that's going to cost quite a bit of money. Right. You can bring in someone to do that. So it's kind of like either you sacrifice or you invest. You invest a chunk of what income you would have made for a leader to take that over, or you have to do that yourself. And oftentimes for self-managed people, they want to do it themselves because they keep more of the money. Right. So your skills need to rise to that level to be able to lead a self-managed company of that size.
That's awesome.
Right? So that's kind of the four types, though. You got Solopreneur, Zone of Genius, Building to Exit, and Self-Managed.
Yeah, and so just the quick notes. I I put down here. So solopreneur growing to perhaps the level of a boutique solopreneur. Thumbs up, it's agile, low overhead. Thumbs down is it doesn't have any resilience, right? Like you get hit by a bus, there is no more business. Zone 2 is the zone of genius business, where you really get to only do what you love, which is a huge pro. The con, though, you have to learn to find and lead a team to empower that. Zone 3, building to exit. I think this is the one a lot of people default to or think of when they think of building a quote unquote real business or big business. So no responsibilities once you exit, which is awesome. And then you mentioned no cash flow when you sell. And I would say the other thing I've seen with people who have experienced this is a real jarring loss of identity. It's like I built this great thing and I sold it, and now who am I? So there's definitely some of those dynamics if you're not moving towards something when you leave the thing that you built and that you loved for so long. And I really like that you put at the top the self-managed business. So it prints money. Huge pro. It's kind of the dream job. But the downside here is you're not completely removed. And if you're not careful with how the leadership is hired and maintained and mentored, you could slip really quickly back into level 2, like basically having to do the things because other people aren't doing it or aren't capable. So that's super awesome, Jason. So I hope everyone can just kind of like envision, what am I building to? And that doesn't mean you have to do it today, but like the things you do now should be in alignment with your ultimate vision, at least as far forward as you can see now. And, when I kind of stumbled into creating this business a couple of years ago, like the ultimate success was like, oh man, I could get like multiple 6 figures and run my own thing and have a couple of VAs. And then I got that and I was like, that's awesome. And I hit 7 figures and I was like, oh wait, I'm no longer like, it's starting to be very painful in the fact that I'm not only in my zone of genius, because there's so much going on when the business gets to this size, that I made a conscious decision with Jason's help to be like, let's really get clear on what is your zone of genius and like, what do you need to support you only being in your zone of genius? And I'd say I'm like halfway through that in some of these hires I've made, some of the systems we've got in place. And that's really what this year is about, is professionalizing the business so I can be in my zone of genius. And the way I view the build to exit is like, today's literally my 45th birthday. Like I'm not looking to retire anytime soon. I love what I do. So what I would love to build though is a business that lets me be in my zone of genius until I don't want to. Like, and maybe my zone of genius changes or my interests change. And so I'd love to have the option to pretty quickly be able to sell it or make a decision to be self-managed, find a CEO to step in while I go do something else. I feel like that's way down the road, but I feel like the critical thing now is getting fully into this like zone of genius business. So I hope anyone listening that's in any variety of places in your business with this, I hope this gives you clarity on really the 4 options you should be building towards. So anything you want to add to that, Jason, before we start to wrap up and you can tell people what the next step is to learn more about you and the cool work that you guys do?
Yeah. Well, actually, it ties right into that. So if you don't mind, I can just go directly in. Which is like, if you want to discover kind of where you are on that continuum, even as you're trying to like thinking about which one to go to, I have a scorecard that I made that kind of helps you identify that. And so that's at cbalifestyle.com/scorecard. And that is, what is it? Like Charlie Bravo Alpha lifestyle.com, right? /scorecard. And so go check it out. You can fill it in, and what you'll also get is you'll also get what we wrote a PDF called the 5 essential elements of a scalable business, and it gives you all of those pieces. So no matter where you're at in that journey, just getting aware of those pieces and knowing like how to approach them as you're starting your business or growing ready to scale your business is going to become really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've taken the quiz, the assessment scorecard. We with all these terms around because I'm creating my own actually for what we do. But the scorecard, the business growth scorecard, is super valuable on its own, and he's given it to you access to it for free. It takes like 5 minutes, but you're going to go through and on a sliding scale and just answer honestly different questions about your business and kind of where you're at with it. And it's going to really help you get clarity on not only what's going on right now, but how that aligns with where you want to go. So definitely go take the assessment, the scorecard at cbalifestyle.com/scorecard. So Jason, highly recommend everyone go do that. And that's also going to pull people over to start thinking more about systems and scalability and if it makes sense, then obviously they can do a consultation with you and your team and see how you might be able to help them the way you've helped me. So any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just so excited to be able to share with you what we're up to and what we're working on. One thing about the scorecard is at the end of the scorecard, like if you qualify, you'll just get offered a call with me. And right now, I'm opening it up to like just anyone who takes it so that they can get a better understanding. And it's like, like the consult, there's no sale to be had, right? Or we're just going to talk through like what you're looking for me to just get a better idea of what like you're working on. And if there is something you'd like me to do, I'll be happy to offer it, right? But if not, then I'm just glad to provide some information, point you in the right direction so that you can really take your business to the next level.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, go over to cbalifestyle.com/scorecard, get started there. And that will, line you up to get a free consultation with Jason if that's something you're looking to dive deeper into. And if not, you just want to do the scorecard and have the results to interpret yourself, totally fine too. So, Jason, it's awesome to spend this time with you, to get to hear more about your history and unpack. It's always fun when I can do these interviews with people I know, because now I know you in a much deeper way. And it was really fun to be able to share how we've each served each other over this year as we happened upon that fateful table at Traffic and Conversion Summit. It's amazing what happens when you get out there, put yourself out there, and just get in a circle of friends and see how you can serve. So thanks a lot, man. Yeah. I will see you over in the 7-Figure Leap Mastermind community.
Awesome. See you. Thanks.